Happy New Year. It is episode 3 of Johncows Corner, and this weekend it is football wildcard weekend. And I can't wait to jump into the show, so let's get started. Welcome back, one and all. It has been a long, cold 2 weeks up here in Mordor, Wisconsin. But I have kept myself busy with my job and watching football and playing video games. And today we are going to jump right in and talk about the big news. The Green Bay Packers absolutely blowing out the Dallas Cowboys yesterday. It wasn't even close. The only points the Cowboys really scored quickly on was in junk time when the Packers were playing their third and fourth string players. But when their starters were on the field, Dallas couldn't do anything. Now I have a couple of theories on why that happened, and I'll get into that here in a couple minutes. But, just to start with, everybody get off Jordan Love's back. At this point, he has proven he is the quarterback for the future for Green Bay. He has done an amazing job. I mean, here's some stats. Over the last 9 games, he went 6-3. Total yards on the season, 4,159, 32 touchdown passes, and 11 interceptions. Over that last 9-game stretch, he threw 18 touchdowns against 1 interception. That is incredible. The defense actually rose to the occasion, which was impressive over the last 3 games. I'm talking about the Vikings game, the Bears game, and, of course, the Dallas game. And I'm not holding the last quarter against the defense. Again, like I said, they were playing their backups, so Dallas was bound to get some points. I mean, they are, after all, the top scoring offense in the league this year. But to go down to Texas Stadium, AT&T Stadium, and absolutely demolish the team that a lot of people thought were going to be the Super Bowl champs this year, and not even like make it look hard. I mean, they've made it look so easy to just destroy the Cowboys and America's team. I'm still speechless. I'm still speechless. I have believed in the Packers all year long, but even I was like, it's going to be a tough game. I was not convinced that they were going to win, but I thought it would be close. I was thinking like 28-24 for the Cowboys, and in my dreams, I would expect that the Packers would win 27-24, but they dropped 48 freaking points on the Dallas Cowboys. Think about that for a minute. 48 freaking points on their own turf in the playoffs. So that makes it 0-3 for Mike McCarthy as the head coach. A lot of people are saying that he's on the hot seat. I personally don't agree. I don't agree. I think that would be the worst thing that the Dallas Cowboys could do right now is fire Mike McCarthy. Here's what I think the main problem with the Dallas Cowboys was. And this is something that's I'm familiar with because of the Green Bay Packers. They had a similar situation a few years ago with a quarterback and a wide receiver by the name of Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. So what the Packers did yesterday was they completely took CeeDee Lamb out of the game. For the first 3 quarters of the football game, he was a non-factor. Pollard had a couple of nice runs, and that was expected against the Green Bay defense. But even then, he didn't have a spectacular game. He had some really nice runs, and that's about it. I saw them playing a lot more traditional defensive linemen on their defensive line to kind of corral that rushing attack of the Cowboys, and they also contained Dak Prescott very well. But they absolutely shut down CeeDee Lamb, and he didn't even become a factor until Jair Alexander went out of the game. I mean, it was blanket coverage all day against CeeDee Lamb. Ferguson had a couple of nice catches, but again, that came in junk time. The Packers completely took him out of their game plan. I can't say enough. I'm looking forward towards the San Francisco game. I have an idea of how the Packers should play that game, but we'll get into that in a few minutes. Now, To kind of go back to my point about why the Cowboys should not can Mike McCarthy. Here's some interesting statistics for Mike McCarthy. Now, he's a former Green Bay Packer head coach, took the Packers to the Super Bowl in 2011 and won it all. He has an incredible career. But here's some things to note. In his 17 seasons as an NFL coach, he's only had 4 losing seasons. 3 of those came with the Packers. So he's been in Dallas for 4 years, and he's only had 1 losing season. Now, to me, ripping off 3 seasons in a row where they go 12-5 and make the playoffs, I'm sorry, you just don't can that coach. You don't. Not after having the season that they had where they were the number 1 offense throughout the year. They had one of the top defenses all year long. Dan Quinn had a phenomenal defense. They got a lot of talent there. If I'm Jerry Jones, I'm like, let the people like me who are just armchair quarterbacks talk about how the Cowboys should, find a way to deal with Mike McCarthy, whether they should fire him or not, or maybe it's time to part ways with Dak Prescott. I don't think that that's the answer for the Cowboys. I really don't. Now, not only that, but his career, Mike McCarthy's career winning percentage is .620. That's a pretty good run right there. I don't have the exact numbers, but he's got like 170 wins versus 110 losses, or 110 losses, and I think he has 2 ties in there. So as far as I'm concerned, if I'm looking at him, that guy is not, if he gets fired by Jerry Jones in the next couple of days or the next week, he is not going to be unemployed long. There are a lot of teams that are looking for a good coach. I could see him going to Washington. I could see him going to New England. There's a lot of teams that are going to be looking for a good quality head coach. The Raiders, they could hire him. So Mike McCarthy's going to be just fine. Now, what did the Cowboys do? How should the Cowboys move forward? And I'm not a Cowboys fan. I'm a football fan. But if I'm Jerry Jones and I'm looking at my team, I'm going to look at, okay, we need a legit number 2. Michael Gallup's not the answer. Brooks is not the answer. You need to get a legitimate number 2 to complement CeeDee Lamb. And you should also get a legitimate slot wide receiver. They had the makings of that with Amani Cooper, and I don't know why they let him go. I don't know if it was a money thing or what was going on there. I'm not a Dallas insider, so I don't know. But you need to get a legitimate complement to CeeDee Lamb. Somebody that can, when CeeDee Lamb is taken out of the game, as he was last night, as the Packers neutralized him, you need somebody that they can count on to pick up the slack and make plays. Gallup couldn't do it. Brooks couldn't do it. Or Cooks couldn't do it. Ferguson's a great tight end, and he did what he could, but they're not a tight end offense, So the other thing I would look at, and where I would actually start for the Cowboys, is their secondary. The Green Bay Packers absolutely blew them up last night. Now, you could say, oh, well, Jordan Love only had 272 yards passing, whatever. But the bottom line is that Jordan Love had a 157.2 quarterback rating last night. He lit up that secondary, and they did absolutely nothing to rein it in. So they've got some questions to answer going into the offseason, but I honestly believe that the Cowboys should not fire Mike McCarthy. They need to look no further than their secondary. They need to get some guys back there that can make plays, especially against big, fast wide receivers like the Packers have. Now, maybe the Packers got lucky, but I've watched the Packers all season long, and those wide receivers are getting confidence with every win. They're gaining confidence with every win. They're the youngest team in the league. They're scary good right now, and they can play Rainmaker for anybody. I don't care. They're playing, and this was said last night on Fox. They're playing as good as any other team in the NFL right now, and they have the potential to play Rainmaker for San Francisco, but I think that's going to be a very different game. So, moving to the next point I was going to make, how should the Packers proceed against the 49ers? Well, if it's me and I'm game planning for the 49ers, I look at it this way. There's only like 3 keys to winning this game. Neutralize Ayuk, neutralize Deebo Samuel, and stop that defensive front 7 from dominating the offensive line. You've got to shut down Chase Young. You've got to shut down Bosa. You've got to shut down Warner. If you can do that, the Packers have a very good chance of coming out on top in that game. It's going to be close. I think it's going to be a close game, but the way that their offense is playing right now, they are scary good. And if anybody doesn't take them seriously, they're going to get a rude awakening, just like the Cowboys did last night. But like I said, Packers need to take away Samuel. They need to take away Ayuk. And they need to make the 49ers rely on Christian McCaffrey. Nothing against George Kittle. He's a fantastic tight end, but he's not a Travis Kelce. He's not somebody that can just take over a game. So if you can make the 49ers focus on George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey, I think you have some very good matchups there. You have Kenny Clark and you have TJ Slayton in the middle, along with Brooks and a couple other big guys that can kind of corral Christian McCaffrey. On the outside, I say you let Rashawn Gary and you let Preston Smith go crazy. You let them play with their hair on fire. You blitz when you need to, and you change up your schemes. You maybe not rush Rashawn Gary every time. You alternate between him and Smith, and then funnel in some Ngabare and Luke Van Ness, and send Quay Walker up the middle as a surprise blitzer. He does a lot in pass coverage. He's a very good run support middle linebacker, but maybe surprise some people and blitz him up the middle. You do a twist or a stunt with the 2 defensive tackles, and who knows? I think you shut down Christian McCaffrey very well there, or you let Quay Walker match up, on Quay Walker and get him some safety coverage from Savage, and it could be a very interesting game next week. Obviously, I'm going to cheer for the Packers like I always do. And they're not favored to win, but I do think if San Francisco doesn't pay attention, it could be a very ugly game for them. So that's the first segment today. Just talking a little bit of football. I'm very excited for my Green Bay Packers. Tough luck to the Dallas Cowboys. We'll see you next year. And bring on the 49ers. Now, today, we're doing something a little bit different. We have 2 more segments. We are going to touch on, and I love this time of year. It's playoff time. So we're going to talk about my 5 favorite football games ever, video games. I think there are some surprises there. I'm looking forward to sharing those with you. And then the suggestion box, I have a little comment I'm going to make to EA Sports and what they need to do, especially when I was capturing footage for the games that I'm going to talk about today. I've got 5 of them. Number 1 is not going to be any surprise, but I think the other 4 might be surprising. So with that, we are going to take a little break, and we will be right back. All right, we're back, and we are moving into my top 5 list of all-time favorite football video games. Number 5 is Joe Montana 2 Sports Talk Football for the Sega Genesis. Now, this game was absolutely incredible when it came out. It was the first game to have actual play-by-play commentary. It kept track of your stats throughout the season. It had all of the teams at the time. Mine, of course, my favorite was the Packers, but it plays a very important role for me because football has been very important in my life with my family, my friends, and the people I care about. And I have some very strong memories tied to this game. My buddy and I, we would get together over Christmas break, and we would fire up my Sega Genesis, and we would play Joe Montana 2 Sports Talk Football. And the cool thing about this, it's the first game that allowed you to play cooperatively on a team. So we would take the Buffalo Bills because we were huge fans of Bruce Smith and Thurman Thomas. and we would absolutely pound the snot out of every other team. And you could play a full season all the way up through the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. And the thing is this game had all of the regular licenses and everything for the teams. It didn't have, the only players that it had was Joe Montana, but I didn't care because I just loved playing this game with my friends and my family. Now you can hear the play-by-play in the background. It's very robotic. It's very old. You could tell. But the fact that they were able to fit this on a Sega Genesis 16-bit cartridge is absolutely incredible. There's no other way to say it. I wish that you could play more than one season. I wish that it had a free agent feature. I wish it had some other things, some other bells and whistles. But as far as the plays and the controls and how you played the game, it felt like real football. Especially with the play-by-play commentary. It even had a halftime report and a post-game report. First time ever in any game for that. It was just incredible. It was just an incredible game. And, eventually it kind of fell in line with Madden with the 93 and the 94 and the 95 games. So it didn't evolve quite the way that I would have liked to have seen it evolve. But still, for a Genesis game, a cartridge-based game at the time, this was definitely top shelf. So, moving on. My fourth favorite game on my list for football is NFL Head Coach 2009. This game came packaged with the Madden 20 box set. It included John Madden Football 2009, NFL Head Coach 2009, and it also came with Madden 93, a remaster of Madden 93. But the cool thing about the NFL Head Coach 2009 is that it's based on the NFL or the Madden 2008 engine, so the graphics are actually pretty good. But you play the role of the head coach and the general manager. So you are responsible for prepping your team each week to take on your opponents. Now you could play it as a dynasty mode. There were several seasons. I think there was 30 in total. And the thing that was cool that EA did with this, and what really stuck with me, was that they curated the draft classes. So there were several draft classes that had characters that were kind of nods to famous players, the most notable of which was Bo Jackson, obviously for Bo Jackson. And so you wanted to pay attention to the draft classes that came through, because they might fall in your lap and you might get a really great star player for your team, and it would change the whole complexion of the game. Now, you also had to take into consideration your approval rating. If you mismanage your team and your approval rating falls too low, you would get fired. And there's no guarantee that you're going to get hired by another team. But each coach, the head coach, the position coach, the assistant coaches, they all had like a skill tree similar to what was going on with the NCAA games at the time with the coaches carousel. And so you would earn XP through the game for all these different situations that had come up. Like get a first down, you get so much XP. Get a touchdown, you get so much XP. Get a sack, get an interception, get a pick six, you get all this XP. If your players came through the games without injuries, you get XP. If you managed their fatigue properly, you would get XP. And depending on how good your coach would develop, or how well you would develop your coaches, you could steal other teams' plays from their playbook at the end of the game. If you played really well, you could steal like a defensive play or an offensive play, and then your players on your team would progress based on how you would train them during the week leading up to the game, and they would perform depending on how you would train them leading up to that game. The only criticism that I have for this game is it has a kicking bug, like a a punter and a kicker bug. So if there aren't enough punters available, you want to be mindful of this, because if you don't get a kicker or a punter as a free agent or in the draft, it will freeze your game. It did it to me twice, and then I figured it out. So I always made sure I had a punter or a kicker on my team, a punter and a kicker on my team, so that it would not freeze me out of the game. Now, it did come out on both the Xbox 360 and the PS3. I bought the Xbox 360 version, and I am glad I did. The PS3 version was so full of bugs and broken code that you would be able to play about 4 seasons, and then you wouldn't be able to continue anymore. So I'm very glad I went with 360. The 360 version does not have that game-breaking bug. They released a massive patch for the Xbox 360 after the game had been out for a month or two, and it was something like 3 gigabytes, which is just incredible for a game like this. Now, the other criticism I have, so I lied, I have 2 criticisms, was that when you sign players, you were just given specific terms. You weren't able to set the terms of your contracts with your players yourself. You had to go with what the game proposed. So, like, if I wanted to re-sign Aaron Campman, it would say, oh, well, he's worth 2 years, $19 million or something like that. Or I could, and then it'd give you like 5 or 6 options to choose from. But, you know, being mindful of the salary cap, which is a big thing in this game, you know, some veteran players, and this is just like real football. I mean, you have to like let some of your veteran players go and get some other players in. Another thing that I really liked in this game was that you could make trades with other teams, and you could trade away multiple picks to get multiple picks, which I thought was a nice touch. And there were different events that would pop up during the week, like a press conference, or there would be certain free agents that are interested in coming to your team. You didn't have to worry about monkeying around with the management of the facilities or anything like that, but you did have to be mindful of how you rehabbed your players in order to get them back. Just some really cool gameplay ideas there that I really like. And actually, after playing it this weekend for this video, I decided I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually sit down and spend some time with this game, because I had a hell of a lot of fun this weekend playing it. My number 3 is classic. It is 100% a classic game. It is Madden 99 for the PlayStation. This game ushered in a whole new era of football for me. Now, I've always been a stat junkie. I've always loved the statistics of football and charting how players play over season over season. But Madden 99 is the first game that came out with a franchise mode, a true franchise mode. And you could play 10 seasons. It included a 4-round rookie draft. And it's the first Madden game that actually had polygons for its characters. Like all the player models and everything were actual polygons. Now, it doesn't look good by today's standards. It's pretty rough. But for the time, to be able to do that, sign free agents, develop your players, and actually have a 4-round rookie draft, it was incredible. It was incredible. And then you could play multiple seasons of franchise mode, and you would actually be able to name your coach. I always named it after me. But, and it had the ability to negotiate contracts. I think there was formation subs as well. So it had a lot of depth for a PS1 game. To me, it was the first great Madden game. Flat out. I'm just saying that right now. Madden 99 was the first great John Madden football game. I mean, I loved the Madden games up to that point, but Madden 99 is what really shined for me. And it was funny because I completed my first season for Madden 99. Took the Packers to the championship, won it all, and came to the offseason. I needed a running back because Ryan Grant, I'm not a fan of Ryan Grant at the time. Barry Sanders was a free agent. The Lions let him go, and I signed him, and I was just pumped. I couldn't believe I got Barry Sanders. It's the draft pick that should have been, The Packers should have picked him instead of Tony Mandarich, but they didn't. But I righted that wrong. I signed him to my team, so I'm all fired up. Play through the preseason, get into the regular season games. First snap from scrimmage, ruptured disc in his neck, career-ending injury. He played one snap for me. So $10 million down the drain with Barry Sanders with a career-ending injury. So what can I say? The rest of the season was very difficult for me without Barry Sanders. But Madden 99, my number 3, fantastic game. If you don't have it, go pick it up. You can get it for about $10 on eBay, I think, for the PlayStation. And it is backwards compatible with the PlayStation 3. So just throw it in and just have some fun. Okay, my number 2. Now, initially I wasn't going to put this on my list, but here's the deal. ESPN NFL 2K5 was a masterpiece of a game. Now, why do I say that? Because if you look at it, the visuals right now in this game are on par with the visuals that you are getting with Madden 24. Now, yeah, you can say, oh, well, Madden 24 is 4K and it's got real grass and it's got blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is, tit for tat, 1080p for 1080p, this game is just as good looking as any of the recent Madden games. Now, why does this make it so high on my list? It boils down to one thing and one thing only: presentation. Visual Concepts went out, and this was back before the EA Sports exclusivity deal, which is just an abomination as far as I'm concerned, because it basically made EA the only game in town. But we're talking about ESPN NFL 2K5. So ESPN 2K5 was a continuation of the NFL 2K series. Now, NFL 2K1, I was a huge fan because, well, the 2K series, I was a fan because of the Dreamcast, and I really loved what they were doing. But the presentation of the game is top-notch even today, 20 years later. It is better than anything that Madden has put together in recent history. You have the ESPN license with Chris Berman. There is a pregame, there is a postgame, there is a halftime show. There are highlights from the games around the league. So, like, you'll be watching the postgame at the end of the week, and all of a sudden, you roll into footage from a Miami Dolphins game. And it has the typical patented Chris Berman. He could go all the way. And the play-by-play announcers are fluid. They sound like they're actually calling the game. They're not. There's not a whole bunch of repetition in what they say. I mean, you do have that with you play it enough. Like, I played several seasons with the game. You do get that. But the controls were fantastic. It introduced coach mode. So if you wanted to be just the coach, which is a huge thing that I love just being the coach. You could. You didn't have to play the plays at all. You could just call the plays, let the AI simulate it based on the player ratings. Now, of course, this came out in 2004, so the Packers were still kind of on top of their game. They still had an incredible roster that included Brett Favre and Antonio Freeman and Robert Brooks, and of course Donald Driver. And you have Amon Green, the running back, and so, you know, the coach mode just kind of fit for me. And then you have the broadcast cameras on the replays. You have some commentary about what is going on the field. There's even diagrams, like pass distribution for the different players. So, like, if, like, for example, Steve McNair in this game had a very bad game, they show his distribution around the field on where he is putting the passes and where he's been successful and where he's not. Same thing with the running game. It shows where the running backs are getting the ball handed to them and how well it's working. And then on top of that, in the middle of the game, you're getting stat updates for your players. So, like, it'll have up in the left-hand corner, like, their year-to-date stats as they adjust from playing the game. And then at the end of the game, it goes to the highlight reel for the game, and then you have a sideline reporter step in and talk to the player of the game. In this case, for me, it was Amon Green. But this game had the Lambeau Leap. It had everything. Great soundtrack. You could see it has the polygonal fans in the stands doing what they do. Madden didn't do any of this without ESPN being there. Here's the halftime show I was telling you about. This is fantastic. The fact that it does it, it breaks down exactly what the stats are for the game. It breaks down, if you look, there's a crawl down on the bottom that has all of the rushing stats, all of the stats, just like a real football game. And Madden never did this. And they still don't do this. And it makes me angry every year. They've had the exclusive license for 21 years. And they have, 2006. So they've had it for 18 years, and they have done very little with it. And as you can see, the visuals are not bad. And I'm later on in my suggestion box, I'll have some other highlights from the current Madden game, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I wish that ESPN was able to keep the license. And the other kick in the junk for Madden on this one was that this game came out for $20. And it came out a month before Madden. So you get to play NFL rosters and everything. And the thing is you could play 30 seasons of Dynasty mode. Eventually, you would run out of the players, but the point is that you had 30 seasons of Dynasty mode. You had day-to-day planning and training for your players, just like you would for NFL head coach. And this is before head coach was even an idea for EA Sports. Just everything with this game is just magical, and EA Sports still hasn't got it right. Their play-by-play is abysmal. It's broken. It's the same play-by-play that it's been for the last 10 years. They need to go back and review this and see what went right, because this game had it all. All right, here's the one that's not a surprise to anybody. My number one is, of course, Tecmo Bowl, and there is one reason and one reason only. And he's running the ball right now. He's going to get a touchdown. Everybody knows who he is. It is Bo Jackson. This game was phenomenal. This game was the first game that had the NFL license. This is the first game that had the NFL players license. Now, the only flaw in the game was it only had, I want to say, 16 teams or 20 teams. It didn't have the full NFL. But the teams that it did have, you're talking about the Bears with Walter Payton and Willie Gault and Dave Duerson and Mike Singletary and Richard Dent and Keith McMichael. The list goes on and on. You had the Raiders with Marcus Allen and Bo Jackson and Tim Brown and Todd Christensen. Just Howie Long at defensive end. You had the Browns with Mack as the running back. There goes Walter Payton right now for a touchdown. It's to me, it is the perfect football game. It will always be my favorite because this is the game that got me interested in football statistics. If you look at the top of the screen, it says Walter Payton, 1,852 yards rushing and 14 touchdowns. That's what he had the year before. That's not what he had when I was playing with him. It didn't track stats in this version of the game. But what I did was I went and I got a notebook, and I still have the notebook on my shelf. It's a nice piece of nostalgia. But I would pick a team, didn't matter who. I started out with the Raiders. Then I moved to the 49ers. Then I moved to the Browns, and I moved to different teams at different times. And I charted all of their statistics. How many completions the quarterback had for how many yards, how many receiving yards did their top receiver have, how many rushing yards did Bo Jackson have, or Marcus Allen, or whoever their top running back was, Dan Hampton for the New York Giants, how many sacks that I got with their key players, for example, Richard Dent or Mike Singletary or Howie Long or Lawrence Taylor, or the list goes on and on. And I would keep track of that. And just see, and then at the end of the season, I would tally up all of my stats to see how I did. And then I'd decide, okay, do I want to see if I can beat these stats with this team, or do I want to choose a different team and see how I can do. And more often than not, I would choose a different team. Like one year I played as the Redskins. Fantastic. Doug Williams is the quarterback. And Ricky Smith was the running back. And, you had all these different players playing at that time. It was the golden age of football. Miami had Dan Marino, and they had Mark Clayton, and they had all these great players. The Seattle Seahawks had Brian Bosworth and Steve Largent and, Chris Warner. And it was just a fun damn game to play. And so I would chart all of my stats just to keep track of them. So that is my number one, Tecmo Bowl. A little bit later this week, I am going to be doing a Let's Play for Tecmo Super Bowl 3 on the Super Nintendo, just to kind of show you how the game evolved from the first Tecmo Bowl all the way up to the Super Nintendo version of Tecmo. Now, they did release one last Tecmo Bowl game, Tecmo Super Bowl for the PlayStation. That game did not have as much going for it because by that time the writing was on the wall. They couldn't compete with the big studios, namely Sony and of course EA, and so they kind of fell out of favor as far as the license and everything. But I still, all of the Tecmo games I absolutely love. I even love the basketball games. They're fantastic. If you don't have them, and I might actually do a Let's Play on the Sega Genesis version of Tecmo Super Basketball, because that's a fantastic game in and of itself. But I don't want to get off track too much. So Tecmo Bowl, NES, my favorite all-time football game. And rounding out the day, we are going to visit the suggestion box. And this, it ties right into my main theme. EA Sports this year released Madden NFL 24, or last year released Madden NFL 24. And I gotta say, it's a huge disappointment. Madden, ever since they got the exclusive license from the NFL to be the only NFL football game in town, has basically rested on their laurels. Visually, it's an incredible looking game. I mean, you look at the players; they look like the actual players. Kirk Cousins looks like Kirk Cousins. The coaches look like the actual coaches, like Matt LaFleur right there. But the bottom line is, the play-by-play has been the same game engine that it has been since Madden 2006. They just put in new voices. They for a while it was Gus Johnson, and then they had Phil Simms and Chris Collinsworth, which I think were a better team than anybody else. Then they had Jim Nance and somebody, and then they settled on Brandon Gaudin and I forget the other guy, that Charles Johnson. I can't remember his name. But anyways, it just doesn't stack up. You look at ESPN NFL 2K5, and they absolutely crush it. The halftime show, the pregame, the end of the postgame, in every single instance is beat out by a game that is 20 years old. 20 years old right now. EA Sports, if I'm you, I suggest you just release a comprehensive update this year for Madden NFL 24. It's a decent platform. You finally got a decent platform, but it's not great. And just do a roster update. That's what you do anyways. The features that you claim that are new are not that new. Bring back a lot of the stuff that fans want. Like in this year's game, you can't do the Lambeau Leap anymore. You can't. There are no stadium-specific celebrations, which is embarrassing if you ask me. So just do a comprehensive update, patch some of that stuff back in, give us the new rosters, maybe curate some draft classes. That'd be kind of nice to kind of call back to NFL head coach in some of the earlier Madden games, and get this game polished. And then look 2 years down the road. Look 2 years down the road and build a new engine. I don't care what platform you use, but build a completely new engine for play-by-play, build a brand new engine for gameplay, player models. Because right now, the player models all function the same. Offensive linemen, defensive linemen, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, they all, on a base level, function the same. Their stats, like their physical abilities, do affect some things, like speed. But when I'm drafting players in the offseason or looking at free agents in the offseason, when it comes to quarterbacks, I'm only looking at arm strength, throwing power. That's the only one that matters. The rest of it doesn't matter because you can train them. Running backs, I look at speed and I look at power. There's no reason to look at anything else. Speed and acceleration and strength. Those are three big ones because I like to run a two-back backfield with a power back and a scat back. Wide receivers, you only need to look at speed and acceleration. I like taller wide receivers, but it doesn't really matter. Speed and acceleration is the only thing you need to look at. Tight ends, depends on how you play. If you want to play a blocking tight end, two tight ends that block, look at that strength, look at blocking power, etc. But if you want a vertical tight end, kind of like Kelsey or kind of like George Kittle, then go with speed and acceleration. That's the only stat you need to look at. The rest doesn't matter. Offensive lineman, defensive lineman, look at strength. Only thing that matters, strength. That's it. Maybe break block for the defensive lineman, but not critical. Linebackers, inside, outside, doesn't matter because you can move them around. All you need to look at is speed and acceleration. The rest doesn't matter. If you have the fastest linebackers out there that can keep pace with wide receivers and tight ends, they're going to get home on their blitzes. That's the way this engine works. Physical size and dimensions doesn't matter. It looks cool. As far as what was it? In last year's game, I drafted a 6'7" defensive tackle, and I moved him, defensive end, and I drafted him specifically because of his size. He was 6'7", 318 pounds, but his speed factor was off the charts, and so that's why I drafted him. But he looked cool out on the field, but his size didn't matter. Physical dimensions of players in this game do not matter. And that's something that EA needs to look at. It's a waste of people's time to even put that stuff in there. And I get angry when I think about it because this is not the Madden that I grew up playing. For me, probably the best version of Madden is, and I know I raved about Madden 99, but when it came to gameplay balance with features and what you could do, Madden 2005 was probably the best, most innovative Madden game to date. And why do I say that? Because they still had competition. They had the ESPN NFL 2K franchise to contend with, and that was the last version of Madden where they had any pressure to perform. Look at how abysmal the launches for 2006, 2007, and 2008 were on the next-gen consoles at the time, the Xbox 360 and the PS3. They were just horrendous. No play-by-play, no real controls to speak of. It got slightly better in 2009 and 2010, but 2010 had a game-breaking bug. If you didn't have a kicker on your roster at the end of the season, oh well, too bad, your season is frozen and you have to start all over again. So you couldn't continue your franchise if you didn't have a kicker or a punter on your roster. You got to have both, or else your game freezes. And it was a game-breaking bug, and that is inexcusable. It's like every year since about 2012, maybe? No, 2013. That was Madden 2014 was, well, I think it would be Madden 25 at that time. Which don't even get me started on the naming conventions. It's stupid. But that was the first game that had this kind of platform that they're using right now. They introduced like a pretty cool scouting mechanic. They introduced a lot of the things that they took out when they launched on the next-gen systems. But it still was far from a perfect game. When they launched on the Xbox One and the PS4, it was slightly better. Those games were completely playable, and they are essentially the same platform that they are right now. Madden, EA Sports, you got to do something with your flagship game. It is atrocious that you've let it fall this far. you have legacy errors you have legacy bugs with this game that go back 20 years. There is the pass interception bug. There's the fumble bug. There are teleporting defensive backs. They're still in the game. This is inexcusable. This is stuff you've known about for 20 plus years, and you've done nothing to fix it. You had AWS stats for 2021. You got rid of it, which I absolutely loved. I liked seeing those stats on screen, and you don't have them anymore. You got rid of them. It was the one innovation that you did that I really liked that made me feel like it was a real NFL game, and you got rid of it. I don't know who's managing or heading the EA studio that puts out EA Sports right now, but you should be ashamed of the product you're putting out. It's not a good game. It hasn't been a good game. If you want to play a great football game, a great simulation, there are two that come to mind. And I'm going to be doing an in-depth review for both of those in the coming weeks. One is Legend Bowl, which is a fantastic throwback game. It stole a lot from Tecmo Bowl and the Tecmo series. And the other one is Axis Football. They have 5 games in the series. The most recent one was Axis Football 2024. It's fantastic. It is actual football. Your players matter. Their stats, their abilities matter. You can't just draft best on the board. You actually have to do some thinking about how you're going to fit this player into your roster. And it's a totally fresh take on football, and it's only $20. Both of those games, each is only $20. So I would recommend picking up Legend Bowl if you're more of a Tecmo fan, or Axis Football if you want a more real football experience. That's my rant for today. I will have my next podcast out on time next weekend. This one was a little bit late because this is a bit larger episode. So with that, I want to say thank you to everybody who's been supporting the podcast. I'm going to get back on my weekly schedule. But until then, as I always say, please be safe, be kind, and remember, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, you do matter and you are loved. So take it easy, everybody.